scientists found Han Chinese are not one people. There are 8 different genetic groups. When geneticists analyzed DNA from Han Chinese populations across China in 2020, they made a discovery that challenges one of the world's most fundamental assumptions about ethnic identity. The Han Chinese are the world's largest ethnic group, comprising over 1.4 billion people, or roughly 18% of humanity. China's government and cultural narrative portray the Han as a unified people with common ancestry and shared genetic heritage. What the DNA revealed was completely different. Han Chinese are not one people. They are at least 8 genetically distinct groups that are as different from each other as Italians are from Germans. These groups descended from separate ancient populations that merged culturally and politically, but maintained genetic distinctiveness. The discovery shatters the myth of Han unity and reveals that Chinese ethnic identity is a political and cultural construct, not a biological reality. The Han Chinese identity dates back over 2,000 years to the Han dynasty from 206 BCE to 220 CE. During this period, China was unified under centralized government. The ruling elite promoted cultural standardization, including written language, philosophy, and social customs. People living under Han rule began identifying as Han regardless of their ancestral origins. This identity persisted through subsequent dynasties. Over centuries, the Han identity absorbed dozens of distinct ethnic groups. Populations speaking different languages and practicing different customs were gradually assimilated into Han culture. By the modern era, Han Chinese identity was seen as ancient and monolithic. The genetic evidence proves this perception is wrong. The 2020 study collected DNA samples from over 11,000 individuals representing Han populations from across China. Researchers analyzed genetic markers across the entire genome. They used sophisticated statistical methods to identify genetic clusters, groups of individuals who share more DNA with each other than with other groups. If Han Chinese were truly one people descended from a common ancestral population, the analysis would show a single genetic cluster. Instead, it revealed 8 distinct clusters corresponding to different geographic regions and dialect groups. The first major division separates Northern Han from Southern Han. This split is ancient, dating back thousands of years. Northern Han populations descend primarily from Yellow River agricultural communities that developed in northern China around 9,000 years ago. These northern populations spread across the North China Plain, growing millet and wheat. They remained relatively isolated from southern populations for millennia. Southern Han populations descend from Yangtze River agricultural communities that developed rice farming in southern China. These populations also remain geographically separate. When genetic analysis compares northern and southern Han, the differences are substantial. They are more genetically different from each other than Swedish people are from Spanish people. Yet both are classified as Han Chinese. Within the Northern Han cluster, genetic analysis identifies subgroups. Populations in the Central Plains around the Yellow River heartland show one genetic profile. Populations in northeastern China near Korea and Mongolia show slightly different profiles reflecting historical mixing with Altaic-speaking peoples including Mongols and Manchus. Populations in northwestern China show influences from Central Asian groups along the Silk Road. These northern subgroups are more similar to each other than to Southern Han, but they are still distinguishable genetically. Southern Han populations show even more internal diversity. The analysis identifies at least 5 distinct southern clusters. The Wu-speaking populations around Shanghai and Zhejiang show one genetic profile. Cantonese-speaking populations in Guangdong show another. Min-speaking populations in Fujian show a third. Hakka populations who migrated extensively across southern China show a fourth. Gan-speaking populations in Jiangxi show a fifth. These southern groups differ from each other almost as much as they differ from northern Han. The genetic diversity within southern Han reflects complex history of migration, mixing with indigenous non-Han populations, and geographic isolation in mountainous terrain. The Hakka deserve special attention. Hakka are a Han subgroup who migrated from northern China to southern China in several waves starting around 1,500 years ago. They maintained distinct dialect and cultural practices, despite living surrounded by other southern Han groups. Genetic analysis shows Hakka carry a unique mix of northern and southern ancestry. They have more northern genetic ancestry than other southern Han groups, confirming their northern origins. But they also show significant southern ancestry from mixing with southern populations over centuries. Hakka genetic profile is intermediate between northern and southern Han, making them genetically distinct from both. Why do these genetic differences exist if all these groups identify as Han? The answer lies in how Han identity formed. The Han identity is cultural and political, not genetic. When the Han dynasty unified China, many distinct ethnic groups lived across the territory. Northern population spoke Sino-Tibetan languages related to modern Mandarin. Southern population spoke Tai-Kadai, Austroasiatic, and other language families unrelated to northern languages. The Han government promoted Sinitic culture and language. Over centuries, many southern populations adopted Chinese language and customs. They began identifying as Han even though their genetic ancestry remained distinct. The process continued through subsequent dynasties. By the Qing dynasty, 1644–1912, most populations within China's borders identified as Han regardless of genetic background. This process of cultural assimilation created the genetic diversity visible today. Southern Han populations descend partially from ancient southern indigenous groups who adopted Han culture. Genetic studies confirm this. Southern Han carry ancestry from ancient Tai-Kadai and Austroasiatic populations who were not originally Han. Northern Han populations also absorbed non-Han groups including various Altaic-speaking peoples. The modern Han Chinese are a genetic mosaic created by cultural assimilation over 2,000 years. The discovery that Han Chinese comprise 8 genetic groups has significant implications. First, it demonstrates that ethnicity is socially constructed. The Han identity feels ancient and natural to people who identify as Han. But genetically, Han Chinese are as diverse as Europeans. Calling all these groups Han is similar to calling all Europeans Roman because they share some cultural heritage from the Roman Empire. The label is cultural, not biological. Second, the genetic diversity has medical implications. Different Han subgroups show different disease susceptibility profiles. Northern Han populations show higher rates of certain conditions while Southern Han show higher rates of others. Genetic variants affecting drug metabolism also differ between groups. Medical research and treatment protocols developed for one Han subgroup may not work optimally for others. This is driving interest in population-specific medicine that recognizes genetic diversity within the Han category. Third, the findings challenge Chinese nationalism. Modern Chinese political discourse emphasizes Han unity as the foundation of Chinese civilization. The government promotes narratives about 5,000 years of continuous Han culture. Genetic evidence shows this is oversimplified. Han Chinese did not exist 5,000 years ago. The identity formed 2,000 years ago through political unification and cultural assimilation. The people who identify as Han today descend from many different ancestral populations who were genetically distinct and often culturally distinct. Unity is political achievement, not genetic inheritance. Some Han people resist these findings. They argue that genetic differences are trivial compared to cultural unity. Whether someone from Beijing and someone from Guangzhou are genetically different is irrelevant if they share language, customs, and identity. This perspective prioritizes social identity over biological ancestry. Others embrace the findings as validating regional pride. Cantonese people may point to their genetic distinctiveness as evidence of unique heritage worth preserving. Hakka people may use genetic data to support claims of special status among Southern Han. The genetic differences also correlate with linguistic differences. Han Chinese speak many mutually unintelligible dialects or languages, depending on classification. Mandarin, Cantonese, Wu, Min, Hakka, Han, and Xiang are all considered Han Chinese languages. But speakers cannot understand each other without learning each other's languages. A Mandarin speaker from Beijing cannot communicate with a Cantonese speaker from Hong Kong using their native languages. The linguistic diversity reflects the genetic diversity. Different ancestral populations spoke different languages. When they adopted Han identity, they maintained linguistic distinctiveness even as they adopted Chinese writing system and some cultural practices. Physical appearance also varies between Han subgroups. Northern Han tend to be taller with longer faces and lighter skin. Southern Han tend to be shorter with rounder faces and darker skin. These differences reflect genetic ancestry and environmental adaptation. Populations in northern China faced colder climates favoring larger body size for heat retention. Populations in southern China faced tropical conditions favoring smaller size and darker skin for UV protection. The physical diversity is obvious to Chinese people, but is often overlooked in discussions emphasizing Han unity. The 8 genetic groups are not rigid categories. Gene flow between groups occurred throughout history. Trade, migration, and intermarriage mixed populations. The genetic clusters represent predominant ancestries, not pure lineages. Individuals carry mixed ancestry from multiple groups. Someone from Shanghai might have primarily Wu genetic ancestry, but also carry some Northern Han and Cantonese ancestry from generations of migration and mixing. The boundaries between groups are fuzzy and overlapping. Some researchers argue there might be more than 8 groups. Depending on statistical methods and sample selection, genetic analysis can identify anywhere from 7 to 10 or more Han subgroups. The exact number is less important than the fundamental finding. Han Chinese are not genetically uniform. They are a collection of populations with different ancestral origins who share cultural identity. The formation of Han identity through cultural assimilation continues today. Many non-Han minority groups in China are assimilating into Han culture. Speaking Mandarin, attending Chinese schools, marrying Han people, and moving to Han-majority cities all facilitate assimilation. Over generations, minority group members may begin identifying as Han. This process has been happening for 2,000 years. The genetic diversity within Han Chinese today is partly due to ongoing absorption of non-Han populations. Scientists found Han Chinese are not one people. DNA analysis reveals at least 8 genetically distinct groups as different from each other as European nationalities. Northern Han and Southern Han separated thousands of years ago and remain genetically distinct. Within these broad categories exist subgroups corresponding to different regions and dialect groups including Wu, Cantonese, Min, Hakka, and Gan speakers. This diversity arose because Han identity is cultural and political, not genetic. Over 2,000 years, many distinct ethnic groups adopted Han culture and identity while maintaining genetic distinctiveness. The modern Han Chinese are a mosaic created by assimilation. This discovery challenges myths of ethnic unity and demonstrates that ethnicity is socially constructed. The world's largest ethnic group is not one people. They are many peoples united by culture, not genes.